So today we are talking about this unbelievably terrible train disaster in East Palestine, Ohio, which looks like Chernobyl, and not in the good way. You know, the resorts and the beautiful beaches, in the shitty, terrible, dystopian vision way. We're going to be speaking with Julia Rock. She's a journalist for The Lever. Matt Weaver, who's the legislative director for the Brotherhood of Maintenance of Way Employees Division, BMWED, and member of the Railroad Workers United ISC, and Julie Grant, managing editor and senior reporter for the Allegheny Front. But first, I want to go very quickly. Julia, if you will, can you just give us a brief rundown of what the hell happened here that looks like a mushroom cloud floating over a small city in Ohio?
Well, so in some sense, the story starts 10 days ago or 11 days ago now when an 150 car train derailed, and it was carrying hazardous chemicals, which when the train derailed, there was sort of a fiery scene, and then the chemicals had to be released from the rail cars so that the rail cars didn't explode, sending shrapnel all around the town. So there was sort of first the fiery derailment, and then this plume of black smoke as the chemicals were released.
Now, the train derailed, from what I understand, because the braking system was spitting sparks, or something had happened where for miles it's spitting out sparks on these hazardous material cars and creating a terrible fire hazard even before the derailment.
Yeah, so there was a mechanical axle problem, and you're right. For at least 20 miles before this was captured on video, the train was already on fire. There's sort of a separate issue, which is that these freight trains have Civil War era braking systems, which means that if you're doing an emergency stop, they stop one car at a time.
Julia, it's well known throughout American history that nobody had brakes like the Civil War era brakes. The brakes of the Civil War era are renowned throughout history. Why upgrade them? That would be ridiculous. Julie, you have been on the ground in East Palestine. You are from the area. Tell us a little bit about some of the things that you're seeing. What are the people in this town experiencing, and what kind of help are they getting?
I was there a day or two after it happened, and at that point, like, people were just confused and didn't know what was going on. They were still letting people walk around town. Most people were at like community center. They had opened up the high school and the middle school for like a Red Cross shelter.
This is after the burn off. This is after they had put all these chemicals into a trench and lit it on fire.
No, I apologize. This was right after the initial explosion.
All right.
Okay. So people were staying in the high school, they were out of their homes. And then after they did the venting of the chemicals that you're talking about, people were out of their homes, evacuated. And it was late last Wednesday that they were told they could return.
Why were they told that they could return, Julie? Because I've had some experience in living in areas that are giant burn pits. So can you explain to me why after 5 days they said to everybody, all clear?
Well, what the US EPA said in a press conference was, we have air monitors, stationary air monitors around. We have handheld air monitors. We have so many data points. US EPA is monitoring. The company Norfolk Southern was monitoring.
Oh, wow.
And they hadn't found, they said the air quality was as good as they would expect in any outdoor area. And so they said it was safe for people to come back.
And the evidence of the wildlife dying and the fish dying and chickens dying and foxes swelling up, that didn't trouble the EPA, or the idea that these chemicals are incredibly powerful carcinogens, and they are now in the soil and in the water.
Right. So the soil and water are one thing. The air is something else. My understanding was the chemical that they vented, vinyl chloride, kind of dissipates quickly in the air. The bigger problem is the soil and the water. And the latest numbers I saw from the Ohio Department of Natural Resources said 3,500 fish were killed. It was 7.5 miles of stream and river water was affected by this. We did speak with a professor at University of Pittsburgh who studies vinyl chloride and human health and how it affects the liver. And she kind of explained it dissipates in the air, but it's more persistent in the soil and in the water. These, in terms of drinking water here. So when you're talking about river, you're talking about surface water. When you're talking about drinking water supply, this is groundwater. So
it's also an agricultural area. So it's in, I would assume, some of the crops. But basically, I guess the message to the residents there is come back and breathe, but try not to step on anything or eat or drink anything, but definitely breathe.
Yeah. It's also, people are worried, like they came back and people had soot all over their houses and their cars and things. And, they have to clean this up, but if it's contaminated, there's concern there.
I cannot stress this enough, how this story is repeated time and time again, not just in this country, but in other countries, in terms of toxic exposure and the authorities diminishing and understating the threat that's going to exist for those things. And they need to be far more proactive. But Matt, I want to ask you, you're somebody who's worked in the rail industry for years. Boy, you saw this thing coming like I hate to use the phrase freight train, but boy, this thing has been coming at us for many, many years.
Most definitely. 15 years ago, I was part of a National Labor College hazmat derailment training. And then it was train the trainer, talk to other union people, talk to fire departments, police departments about this. We're killing people. Don't get me wrong, though. This shit should be on the rails or in pipelines rather than on our highways. But we can do better.
But we need safeguards. I mean, Civil War breaks.
What the hell?
And there's no detection system about the heat building up in these cars. Why is vinyl chloride not classified as a dangerous, hazardous chemical in that way?
We need the regulators to regulate. We need our public servants to serve the public. Damn it, man. We can't have these industries owning politicians.
Well, let's talk about Norfolk Southern, okay? So this is their rail system, right? They're worth $55 billion. They are responsible for upgrading these systems. And instead of putting that money into infrastructure, they've been doing stock buybacks.
Ridiculous.
And giving shareholder value. And they just gave, and please tell me if this is incorrect, because it seems so fucking insulting. They offered the town of East Palestine $25,000, not per person, $25,000.
That's what I've heard.
I'll just say they have some numbers that the company Norfolk Southern has put out, saying about 1,000 families and businesses have been helped. $1.2 million has been distributed to families to cover costs related to the evacuation. They've done in-home air tests and in 400 tests and have found no reason to indicate there's a health risk.
Just come on. Just come on. How does anybody who even witnessed a little bit of that, my guess is you can still smell it. Julie, what are the residents saying? Are they just confused, or are they so beaten down by a system that's left them behind for so many years that they're just accepting this?
I don't think people seem like they're accepting it. I don't know that they really know what to do. People I've talked with are stressed. They're
right. I can imagine.
They're worried. They're trying to get back to normal in a certain way, like they're back at work, kids are back at school. But there's like a community meeting tonight for, I think, the community to talk about what they're going to do. Have
they been getting the kind of support, not just locally, but from the federal government, from the state government? Is it all hands on deck? Because I'll be honest with you, I'm only following the media narrative. And Lord knows it's not as dangerous as a balloon filled with Radio Shack components. But I haven't seen shit about this until like yesterday. I mean, it's been remarkable how little coverage this has received.
So the lever where I worked did a huge story last week about how we even ended up in a situation where you have a train carrying a flammable gas, running through a town, derailing,
Hmm.
and then exploding. And of course, a huge part of the story is what you've said. These are companies that over the past decade have decided they're going to spend their profits on enriching shareholders through stock buybacks, especially rather than on infrastructure upgrades on their trains. But
Right.
it's also the story of how, both the Obama administration and the Trump administration failed to regulate the train that was running through East Palestine as a high hazard flammable train. The vinyl chloride on the train did not trigger certain safety laws, retrofits on tanks that are required on other
Hmm.
types of flammable trains. And then, even though the Obama administration moved to require these trains to upgrade their braking systems to, ones that had been invented in the 90s, so still not terribly recently,
The
the
1990s.
railroads, the
All right.
1990s,
There you go.
including Norfolk Southern,
Woo!
lobbied to kill those regulations, got them repealed under Trump, and now Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg has declined to revive them.
Has declined to revive fixing the brakes from the Civil War era brakes.
These regulations, yep.
In your mind, look, Matt, you I'm sure were involved in the talks about the rail strike and various things on there. This is an industry that was willing to shut itself down so as to not allow people who work in it sick days.
Absolutely, and that was the big point on our part as a worker who builds railroad track, bridges, and buildings. One of our biggest issues was sick days. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
the raises were good, but they didn't keep up with inflation entirely. But we have no sick days.
Right.
And just last week on CSX, the new CEO has negotiated with the union. 4 unions out of the 13. We've got 4 paid sick days now. That needs to go across the industry and across all crafts. The biggest part I see is this business model of precision scheduled railroading, PSR, that
Mm-hmm.
is calling for the utmost profit margin. There's no other industry in America that has this kind of profit margin.
I was shocked when I learned the profit that Norfolk Southern was making.
Yeah.
I was honestly stunned. All we've ever heard about is we have an antiquated rail system because it doesn't make any money and they just allow it to rot and to corrode. When I read $14 billion of profit, I was stunned. Or $12 billion in revenue. I'm sorry, that's wrong. 12 billion.
It's shocking, and that goes back to the point of these militant discipline, and in this case, I can't speculate on the cause. We know there's an axle or hot box issue, but the time that it used to take a car shop, a BRC member, to inspect a car used to be 4 or 5 minutes per car. Now we're getting down to where it's required to get that inspection done in 60 seconds.
Because this is precision scheduled railroading says you've got to inspect it in 60 seconds.
Yes, and it's not precision, it's not scheduled, and it's not railroading. It's a bunch of bullshit.
Well, it's railroading you. I believe that may be the case. Now, Matt, this may be a hypothetical, but would inhaling vinyl chloride be considered cause for having a sick day?
Oh, hell.
Or would that nope, you just got to work through that.
We went, in this round of bargaining, we went from essential, we're essential employees. I had a paper in my lunchbox to give to the police if I got pulled over, if there was a quarantine, to say, this man has to go to work, to a ticker tape saying that we're expendable, from essential to expendable, just like that. It's like, son of a bitch.
And I'm sure that's how the people are feeling as well. Julie, tell us a little bit about this area. It's working class. They don't generally build rail yards now in other areas. So these are folks that are providing, as Matt said, the essential services this country needs to survive. What's life like there?
I'll tell you, I live an hour west of there, and I had never heard of East Palestine until this all happened.
Oh, wow.
It's a small town. They do have a nice little downtown there with some, places to eat and regular city services. The people I've met have all, worked in healthcare or worked in, I don't know, I'm going to meet tomorrow with someone who farms there.
Right. Solid working class neighborhood.
Yeah, it just seemed like nice people. Just one of the city council members, this was the day or two after it happened. I was talking with him. I'd never met him before. He has 2 little kids. And I asked him if he was worried. The town had a very strong odor. And he said, oh, it's just the chemicals just running through the waterway. So that runs through town. So don't worry. We're not worried about it. So I think there was a lot of misinformation about what was going on at the very beginning. Right. And I think people wanted to believe that things were going to be okay. And I don't think any of them ever expected to be the center of attention in this particular way.
Understood. And I imagine the plume carried around to a lot of the other areas. I mean, I can tell you, just in the experience from 9/11, the EPA issued a statement, probably not 3 days afterwards, saying all clear. And the students came back, and Wall Street came back, and everybody came back, and cars and things were still caked with dust. And those toxins, and again, a slightly different environment, but those toxins then found their way into, people ate there, slept there, cried there, went to the bathroom there, into everybody's system. So I really urge the authorities to act with caution and protectiveness for the people there, especially the children there. Julia, what in your reporting, does this smell of a cover-up to you, or does it smell of lethargy or apathy? What has caused this sort of strange delay in responsiveness from the national media and from where's the urgency?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, one point to be made is that train derailments and trains carrying crude oil and hazardous chemicals happen all the time, which should not be taken, as.
Yeah, there were 2 more yesterday. There were just it's right. Just a thing, and so this was just business as usual.
So in some sense, this is just business as usual. I will say it's pretty remarkable that I don't believe Biden has still said anything about it. And I think, the first message from the transportation secretary, Pete Buttigieg, was a tweet yesterday saying, he was following the situation. EPA said everything was okay. So I think it's been pretty striking how long it's taken the administration to say anything about it. But, I wonder if part of that is if they acknowledge that something has gone wrong here, it would require things really changing. Because, I'm sure you could speak to this, Matt, but in my experience talking to people who work on the railroads, what they have all said to me is 1, it is remarkable that this does not happen more. And 2, the thing we should be really worried about is something far more catastrophic than this happening. Again, you have these trains running with the workforces have been slashed by almost 30% in the past decade. The brake systems are not being upgraded. Railroads are lobbying against safety rules. Workers are exhausted. Inspection times are falling. And there's just crude oil and hazardous materials being shipped all across the U.S. every day.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, Julia, in this particular area, we have seen the petrochemical industry move in. So we have over 10, 15 years, the fracking industry has really grown in this area. In the past year, Shell has opened a cracker plant, which is where they ship some of these materials to make the building blocks of plastics. They make those little plastic pellets. And vinyl chloride is used to make PVC, another plastic item.
And that's just one chemical. Right. There are other chemicals within there that they're not even bringing up.
And my point is just there are so many more chemicals in this area in particular, freight trains coming through. So you have more chemicals, what Julia's talking about, with fewer regulations or not improved regulations. And, of course, and these are going through urban areas sometimes. You're going through Cleveland, you're going through Pittsburgh, and if this happens in a major city like Quebec, then you're going to have deaths, you're going to have buildings downed. This is going to be even more of a major catastrophe.
Matt, have you seen a diminishment of safety concerns and things? When we're talking about slashing a workforce by 30% while increasing the danger of the chemicals and not improving any of the safety systems, What have you seen over your career in this industry, and the neglect that's causing some of this?
With the cutting of manpower and the railroad's urge to have a one-man crew, this train had three: a conductor, an engineer, and a trainee. You see that, especially on the maintenance away side, the infrastructure, it's all about deferred maintenance. We aren't doing proactive
Right.
repairs. We're waiting till something breaks, till something derails. And a good point that Julie said, trains don't go through rich people's backyards.
Right.
This is the working class concern of the worst neighborhoods in every city is where the trains go through.
Right.
Let's take care of the people, damn it,
Oh, listen, man, if somebody deems you essential, that means you're about to get fucked by the system. I mean, that's just,
Here I am. Yeah.
But I want to read you something. They spent $191 billion on stock buybacks. These are the Norfolk Southern and the 7 largest freight railroad companies. $191 billion on stock buybacks between 2011 and 2021. So that's a 10-year period. And during that time, that's the time when they slashed the workforce by 30%. And that's the time when they lobbied the government not to have to upgrade the braking systems. So who is going to be liable for this?
It's the people who are going to suffer because of this. And
Right.
There is no liability. I mean, the shareholders of the railroads are extremely happy
Right.
to have record profits, great dividends, screaming high profit margins. It's the oligarchy. We need to focus on the lobbying efforts of the railroads and the fact that they've invested so much money in campaign finance and lobbying to deter. We've got 19th century technology running on the rails.
Yeah, the bigger issue that you speak of, which is lobbyist and industry capture of a legislative process, that's the part that, we can have all the sort of right-wing populism that we want, but until they tell their judges that, we're going to be in the same boat, because they can say we want to protect the workers. But if you don't allow for a regulatory regime to have any teeth, industries aren't going to protect those workers. So it's all a bit of a shell game, unfortunately. But I hope that it's seen a little bit more.
No doubt.
If somebody wants to chase this down, if we get Erin Brockovich on this, where does she go?
Well, so there are certainly there's going to be local, litigation, people suing Norfolk Southern. That's obviously already started. It seems like Norfolk Southern is maybe trying to get people to accept a sum of money in exchange for agreeing not to sue them, which is pretty typical. But I think there's another point worth making that we've been making at the Lever, which is that there's someone in charge of regulating the transportation system.
Julia, let's hear about it. Talk to me. Talk to me.
That's Pete Buttigieg. He's the transportation secretary.
My God, are you talking about Mayor Pete? Mayor Pete? Get him in there.
I'm talking about Mayor Pete. There was a huge fiasco with Southwest Airlines in December, and Pete wrote them a letter basically saying, we're very disappointed in you. After a lot of pressure, it seems like maybe there are going to be fines issued. But now a similar situation is happening here, and he has quite a bit of power to hold railroads accountable for this type of thing.
Now, what can he do, Julia? Because that's what can the Secretary of Transportation do? Because if they've got protection from Congress, because we've seen more than almost anything in recent years, the regulatory state, whether it's be the EPA or the Department of Transportation or the SEC, has been neutered by a Congress that is averse to any form of what they would consider a drag on a company's profits or ability to operate. So how does listen, I love a good scapegoat, but how do you operate in an environment where, like you say, they pass a regulation and the lobbyists just come in and undo it? What can he do?
I mean, yeah. So it's his job to implement the rail safety laws. His job and the Federal Railroad Administration's job to implement the safety laws Congress has passed. And there was, some robust rulemaking during the Obama era that Trump undid. So in some sense, there's just a lot to be built up again. Right now, the National Transportation Safety Board, this independent investigative agency, is investigating the incident and will sort of make a declaration about what exactly happened. I think, like Matt said, we don't completely know the details yet, and they will issue recommendations. They had previously recommended that vinyl chloride be regulated as one of these hazardous materials that would subject the train cars to more stringent safety rules. That's something the transportation department could do, is sort of expand the scope of these safety rules. But yeah, right now there's this investigation happening. Will the National Transportation Safety Board's recommendations, findings be sort of accepted, and will the Transportation Secretary take regulatory action? That sort of remains to be seen. But these are regulators, and their job is to oversee these industries. And right now, it seems like they've just been sitting on their hands. Yeah,
well, there's so much capture in those industries. You find that there's that revolving door between regulators and the lobbyists and everybody else.
Yeah, it's you can't trust a for-profit public business to self-regulate. It won't happen.
Matt, I'm afraid I'm going to have to turn off your mic for your socialistic viewpoint, and you're going to have to be removed. No, I'm just kidding. Julie, no, it's true. I mean, what you're saying is true. I remember in the financial crisis, Alan Greenspan famously said, I thought they would be better at regulating themselves, which is to the point. But Julie, what do the people need right now other than clear-cut information in the town? What can be done to maybe bring attention to what they might need to keep them safe over these next few months?
I think one of the things is watching the groundwater supply, making sure that if these chemicals get into the ground, are traveling through the ground, and making sure the water supply is safe. The city is on groundwater, and there are a lot of people with well water here, have their own individual well water.
Right,
it's a rural area. And this is how it potentially could get into people's homes. So that's something that Norfolk Southern says they are doing. They put out some kind of report in the past couple of days that said they would be digging or installing groundwater monitoring wells to make sure, to kind of keep watch and make sure that the chemicals aren't leaching into the water supply.
Is there any authority out there right now that you think has the trust of the population out there, where if they were to say, yeah, we've checked this out and here's where we think the problems are, is there anything there with some level of authority or trust, or is everyone just relying on Norfolk Southern and some federal issuance from the EPA or the state EPA?
I think that's hard to say. I think people are wary, especially because right at the beginning, the EPA was out there saying the air is safe, it's fine. People were worried.
The video is one of the craziest things I've seen on American soil in a non-attack situation, where I was stunned by it. It truly shocking to see the and Julia, what do you know what happened to? There was a gentleman who was arrested. There was a reporter who was trying to cover something and was arrested. And I think that also led some people to believe that something more devastating is going on here, because it was such an unusual thing to do.
I don't know anything more than has been released about the reporter's arrest, but I think you're right that between the images of this plume, the reporter being arrested, sort of people being told everything's okay when, as you said, the foxes were bloated and the chickens were dying,
right?
And then complete silence from the Biden administration for days. I think the entire thing has, maybe one might say unusual, one might say sort of this is the world that corporate lobbyists have created for us, and we're all just living in it.
I thought it was so interesting, the difference in urgency of the evacuate. They said, if you do not evacuate, we will arrest you on felony charges of like child endangerment. I mean, really, you've got to get out of here, and you've got to get out of here fast. And 5 days later, they were just like, okay, evacuation over.
Go home,
everything is safe now. I don't know
no.
what we were thinking about that whole, we were going to arrest you before. It's all good now. Come home. And as a matter of fact, we're going to throw a picnic. Matt, who's got the trust of the rail workers right now? Who do they buy in all of this?
I was pretty excited about Biden, Buttigieg, the people that got in there, that they would definitely defend the working class. And with rail labor, I feel like we've been let down. I mean, we've had a contract imposed on us, no sick days in national bargaining. I have a hard time. I'm a member of Railroad Workers United, railroadworkersunited.org, and they've been very vocal about cross-craft solidarity and what it takes to defend rail labor. I mean, in the early 1900s, we had 1.5 million rail workers. Now we're down to 117,000.
Right.
The industry has been decimated. The manpower has been decimated. And I think it's takes a toll on safety for the American people and the workers.
I mean, Matt, do you feel like, I hate to put it this way, but are people going to have to die? Are rail workers going to have to die before somebody takes this seriously enough to make the changes that it seems like are basic common sense? Infrastructure is basic common sense. And to squeeze workers on sick days when there's so few of them left, it just, none of this makes sense other than, as you say, corporate capture and oligarchy. Like this, it's even the industry is cutting off its own nose to spite its face on this one. It strikes me as.
Most definitely. I've seen, in my career, I've seen 11 guys perish from cancers.
Really?
Non-Hodgkin's lymphoma and esophageal cancer, the guys that I've worked with.
Right. A lot of those blood and absorption cancers that you see around toxic sites. Right.
And only 2 of those guys got to retirement. I mean, my coworkers that I worked with every day have died from these cancers, and it's very frustrating to see. It's worrisome.
Julia, do you have hope that this is, I hate to say a wake up call for the industry, because what it feels like is they're going to wait out until people are no longer paying attention, that the news cycle moves in such a way that small working class communities will be easily forgotten once the smoke plume dissipates. Is that what you're thinking, Julia?
Yeah, I mean, look, Norfolk Southern just announced on its most recent earnings call that they're increasing their dividend. So the company is perfectly happy. I don't think the industry has any reason to change things, and I think it's sort of a matter of whether the government is going to step in and change the rules a little bit. And
right.
As Matt was alluding to, in December, Democrats and the Biden administration busted a potential strike by rail workers that was sort of an effort not just to win things like paid sick days, but also, my understanding, Matt, is longer inspection times. So I think the workers, have been trying to seek in a contract better safety measures, better staffing measures. There's the two-man crew issue that we were talking about. And what side is Biden going to be on in this?
Right. And how's he going to balance that? Because he's working class Joe. I don't know if you know, he's a big fan of trains. Mostly Amtrak, I guess. Not the ones with the vinyl chloride, but the ones with the club sandwiches and the dining cars and these kinds of things.
I think what has been alluded to here is sort of this area of the country is already considered kind of a forgotten area. I mean, it's very easy to, like you said, wait till the next news cycle because, look, this is where the coal miners were. This is where the steel industry was. These are all areas, these are all industries that have sort of faded, and people are still trying to figure out, are these towns even going to survive? And then something like this happens, and it's like, is it even livable here anymore?
I got to say, I think one of the biggest hopes of this is to leverage, someone's going to figure out how to use this as a political attack. And I think almost the best thing that the towns and the rail industry can hope for is to ride some of that momentum into change, because that's actually how it's going to progress. Because what's going to happen is if somebody figures out they can use this to their political advantage, it'll put them on the defense. It's kind of how we operate. We don't do the right thing. We do the thing that we have to do to not lose the job. And so I think that, that may be something when you guys are talking about organizing, to try and keep in mind. If somebody in Washington believes they're going to get hurt by this, that's your best chance of having some action. And if they think they can get away with ignoring it, they'll do that too.
I mean, I would also add that if, along this vein, it's like, look, Ohio was for a long time considered a state that could go either way politically, and now is a fully red state in large part because of this area, the counties around. This is Columbiana County, this area around northeastern and eastern Ohio, and I think this area had voted Democratic since 1972 until the Trump years.
Right.
And so I'm just kind of thinking about what you're saying. It's like, yeah, if somebody, because that's something I'm always looking into, is the more electric vehicle plants and battery plants they bring in, will that shift people to thinking, oh, maybe the Democrats are onto something with this new economy, that sort of idea?
Well, maybe that infrastructure bill has something, but I think there's always sometimes also a disconnect. I mean, as Julia talked about, as you said, they went Republican when Trump came in and they switched over there, and he's the one who helped repeal all the safety standards for the rail lines that are going through there. So sometimes it's just not, there's strange disconnects and people vote for all kinds of different reasons. I meant it more in the way of the pressure that politicians sometimes feel when they feel under attack is oftentimes the best way to get action for them to do the right thing. And I do think that those infrastructure bills may have something in there. Julia, have you seen anything in that? Are these new infrastructure bills going to bring something to these towns and these industries that you think can be helpful?
One thing that's quite interesting about how the Inflation Reduction Act was designed is that it gives companies incentives to invest in green industries in places that previously had fossil fuel or other dirty industries. So there's this real sort of geographic element to the investments, which is quite smart. So if there's a shot at sort of a cleaner and greener future, it might lie in that. Although I think the points Julie's making about how, really the up and coming industry in some ways in that area is petrochemicals, and obviously that's pretty dirty.
Mm-hmm.
And don't get me wrong, Ohio is very swampy. House Bill 6 and the corruption that's going on was defunding green energy and subsidizing coal-fired plants in other states. So Ohio's got some really big problems.
Right. And not maybe also, while moving towards those maybe different industries, shoring up the infrastructure on the industries that clearly exist there and are an important lifeline to a lot of these communities, and I think has to be addressed as well.
Amen.
All right, man. Well, listen, thank you guys so much for joining us. Julie Grant, Julia Rock, and Matt Weaver. I wish you guys the best. Julie, keep in touch and let us know how this town is holding up and what they're doing, and make sure that they are getting the kind of baseline health care that will set them up to be able to detect some of the things that might be coming their way over these next few years. So maybe some of this can be avoided. But I really appreciate you guys being here to talk about it.
Thanks so much.
Thank you, Jon.
This is great. Thanks so much.
Thanks, guys. Here's the thing. The toughest part, it's that view on the ground of those folks, the people who live in that town who are like, we don't know what to do. There are so many, when you think about the general emergencies that hit places, whether it's a tornado or a hurricane or an earthquake, there is a sense of, oh, there's a protocol for this. I understand what to do. We understand the devastation. We know how to clean it up. We know how to rebuild. We know how to rebound. With this, it's the uncertainty where they're just sitting there like, can I eat the food?
Right. Yeah. And I think with that uncertainty, the default that people go to, whether it's leadership or the people on the ground, is like, it's better if everything is if we just decide it's okay. You know, like this isn't that big a deal. And like
Right.
maybe it'll be cheaper if we just decide that it's over.
Mhm.
But where I feel like if we all just could agree on like the worst case scenario, that would actually
Plan
know.
for, why don't we all just assume that
Yes.
this is terrible for people
Right. Yes.
and act accordingly and stop acting like, listen, we tested my guess is it's not going to seep into your produce. So carry on. And because the reason is the things that this will cause, you won't see for maybe years.
Right.
And so by then, who the fuck knows where we'll be? So why bother?
Historically, I can't think of a single case where any oil spill, any burn pit or whatever, it's never been like, we totally overreacted. All the birds and fish are fine. People's skin cleared up.
Except for the balloons. It's always the real
Right.
stuff.
Yeah.
The stuff that
the real
stuff
stuff.
that we can go to war.
That's right.
Yeah.
We
That's
get
the
hyped
stuff.
about.
That's right. And I'm so annoyed at, you've got some of these like very on the right populist figures talking about how we've got to fix this. Meanwhile, these are the motherfuckers that would never spend money on infrastructure, that always shoot those budgets down, that make it impossible for any government to regulate anything. And they're out there, JD Vance is out there. This infrastructure bill doesn't do that. And the working people, well, tell your fucking judges. Tell all the people you appoint then to put some teeth into the regulatory state that can force these rail companies to make the changes that they need to make these safe for workers and safe for the middle class people that are living in these towns. Man, they get up on that high horse, the Biden administration, and this Inflation Reduction Act won't fix it. Well, you know what caused it in the first place? Your fucking policies. Man, that drives me nuts.
Vance is a venture capitalist. What side of this do you think he comes down on? The hedge funds that own this or the people in these small towns?
He and Tucker go on and they play act. They play act this concern for working people and populism. Meanwhile, everything that they put in place politically in their infrastructure is against regulatory improvements and help for working class people. It's baloney.
Civil War era breaks.
Civil War.
What?
They didn't believe in germs yet. Do you know the actual protocol for cleaning your utensils in the Civil War was stick it in the ground and pull it back out? That's the technology that we're operating on.
Okay, to be fair, I still do that.
I need to go to the bathroom. Why not do it in the water we drink? That way.
You don't piss in your water?
We can actually get a 2-for-1 on the water. You can go to the bathroom in it, and we use it to clean our medical supplies.
No one will be the wiser. Why not?
By the way, these train brakes are top of the line.
Let's never change them, no matter what. Agreed? Agreed. Well, I really do hope that these guys get some of the help they needed. And it's starting to feel like some coverage is picking up, but only because it looks like it's starting to be weaponized as a political issue. And that's going to attract more media attention, unfortunately, than a giant plume of smoke that may be poisoning people in, forgotten areas.
And I will just say, I will speak for the train towns since I'm from one. Like, everyone refers to them as like, oh, forgotten towns. But like the people that live there are like, it's not a forgotten town to them. It's like present day. Everyone that they know is there living their lives. It's like a full realized place.
Now, when you say, I think what people mean by forgotten is the industries that started those towns, that gave them the momentum and impetus to become boom towns, has in many ways collapsed.
Sure.
And thus, I think forgotten is probably, you're right. That's the wrong word. It's ill-tended to, so that we've allowed them to wither in ways that are unnecessary.
Right.
And maybe that's a better way of looking at it than forgotten. I think you're probably right, Alexa.
It's also who forgot it, right? They didn't forget about them.
Right.
Right.
National media did. Not to
Right.
get on my Republican talking point horse.
Here we go.
Giddy
Here we
up.
go.
Big time, like we've lost local news, right? So coastal media is the only thing that covers the country. And to them, they forgot about, Eastern Ohio. The people in Eastern Ohio didn't forget about it. But then they have to fly somebody in there as like a war correspondent because they don't have any information sources.
I love the idea of that as an embed. Somebody I've embedded now in East Palestine and I'm trying to do. But what do you do? Part of it is, and it's a discussion we never really have in the country, which is what do you do when the world changes faster than where you live? And how do we deal with the disparity between digital worlds and analog worlds and how they can coexist in a way that doesn't feel like abandonment? Because it feels at times like abandonment. That I'm not suggesting, it's not like saying like, the horse industry, we're not forgotten, we're still here. And everybody's like, but these cars, I'm telling you. It's like, how do you deal with those shifts in industry and geography that absorb some of that energy that's no longer there? I think that's just, it's such a more nuanced conversation about what people are consuming and how they're consuming it. And how do you bring those along? If the identity of your town is, Alexa even said it, I come from a train town. What do you do when people stop that as a vital source?
You go work at Verizon.
Yeah.
Well, okay. I didn't expect the advice to be that
We
easy.
have a Verizon.
All right. Well, shit. I was coming up with a whole policy prescription. But,
no, yours is better. Yours is better.
John, you're overcomplicating it. You just go work at Verizon. It's pretty simple.
Is there a Hobby Lobby? Well, fucking go
definitely.
there.
Hell
All
yeah.
right. Well, there you go.
I once did a
Alexa,
show.
Oh, go ahead. No. I was going to wrap, but give me. I once did a show is an irresistible lead to me, so I have to know.
That was actually the whole story.
No,
I
no,
once
no,
did a
no,
show.
no.
Henrik's done one show. Isn't that cool?
John, I did a show.
Well, I'm so proud of you that you've hit on an irresistible lead for me. So I once did a show, and it better end with a Fuddruckers.
This town was not big enough to have a Fuddruckers. I once did a show in a town, I can't remember the actual name of it. The billboard says like this, Showboat City. Showboat City.
Oh, welcome to Showboat City. Okay.
Because there was a river that went through the town that had a showboat on it. And once a year for like 40 years, stars would come in, like Wayne Newton would come and play at this town every year. And people would gather in this amphitheater on the river and watch the showboat come through town, and it would park there for like a week. And it was like the whole source of this economy or whatever. And then the river dried up and the showboat went away. And so they didn't have shows anymore. And this town was like, the reason we were there was I had a friend who was from this town, and he was like, you should bring all these comedians from Chicago. We're all going to go there. We're going to do a show. And we went and we did a show, and it was super fun. And people were like, you brought the show back to Showboat City. Right. But when you go to those towns, you're like, if your thing's been based on one thing, how do you pivot to something else?
Yeah, your whole identity. Right.
And whether it's the railroad or Wayne Newton coming for a week every July,
right.
It's and whose responsibility is it?
That's right.
Yeah.
And then also, listen, the young people in the town then don't want to stay there anymore. And so the town ages in a certain way. And then the older people always say the same thing, which is, I wish this town was different, but don't ever change it. It's that weird, like, it's got to say the same. My only question is, after the show, did anyone come up to you and say, Henrik, that was no Wayne Newton? Just not my... That was no
big shoes.
I'm not
fill.
sure that was Showboat.
Your sketches were really great, but we would have loved to hear Viva Las Vegas.
Yeah, they were
actually.
like, we're glad the river dried up.
Afterwards, they come up to me and go, Henrik, great show. We can't base a fucking town on that. I'm sorry.
We will simply not be short form improv city.